into Power Athlete Radio. This week's episode with Julien Pineau wastes absolutely no time diving into the issues of training and organizing programming to expose athletes' weaknesses. A passionate Pineau explains the balance of internal and external rotation as the perfect marriage. The goal is for that marriage to result in a beautiful, performance-enhancing baby named Torque. Then that baby grows up, kicking everyone's ass and getting plenty of chicks. The education never ceases at Power Athlete HQ, and thanks to Julien, a fellow performance junkie, we are constantly evaluating the way we perceive movement. Hear how Julien consistently refers to the end game, using chess as the perfect metaphor for movement and performance. With each chess piece serving a specific purpose, it's impossible to ignore their importance, particularly when the end of the game is near. All this and tales of a mutual friend, George Zangus, round out this meeting of the minds. This is episode 179.
Power Athlete Nation, it is Luke. John is here. Tex is over there on the screen in Texas in some sort of art room, right?
Yeah, my sister's a professional artist, but neither here nor there. Let's roll.
John and I are in Newport Beach. We're in the office getting it real steamy, and we are ready to give you another episode of Power Athlete Radio, the premier podcast in strength and conditioning. You heard it there. That's synchronized talking. That makes it even more official.
Well, it's true. It's because we both have been brainwashed enough to know it's a reality.
Yeah, that's right. First, couple public service announcements. Getting certs up for 2017. And the certs have moved. We are now from CrossFit Football Seminar. We are the sport-specific specialty application. Go to powerathletehq.com/events to see the new events popping up in your area. I don't know, Bree, you want to give a little brief 30-seconder about what's new?
Yeah. For those of you guys that have been living in under a bridge and haven't necessarily been plugged into the internet, we ended up.
There's other sites besides ours.
No, it's just us. Everybody lives in our world, right? We started CrossFit Football in 2009, and the program was, wildly successful, and we taught it on every continent, and we were able to have a seminar series associated with CrossFit. And we taught hundreds of these things to thousands of athletes from the Arctic Circle down to New Zealand. And after a bunch of years, we decided that we needed to do some rebranding and really reskin and give the seminar a more accurate name of what it had evolved into. And the seminar had evolved much more past what we were teaching for CrossFit Football. So with, put our heads together with the mothership and came up with CrossFit Sport-Specific Application.
The
CrossFit Specialty Seminar Sport-Specific Application.
Yes, it's very important.
Very important, that branding piece. And when we rebranded the seminar for SSA, we had CrossFit Football hanging out there, and obviously, we do on the backside of Power Athlete, and really that's where what I like to call our bread and butter and the magic happens, where we can really get in and execute and coach and do the things we want to do. So we had to figure out what to do with CrossFit Football. So my vote was to shut it down, put up a gone fishing sign, and go fuck yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And Luke was like, I don't know if that's the best idea. So we had this deal called Project Mayhem,
mm-hmm.
where we asked people to submit an email for the workout, and I figured we took it over and under. I thought I was going to get 50 emails looked up.
No, like 300 was probably.
I think I said 12 originally.
Well, the theory was 10% of the people were posting daily, right?
Yeah,
and there was like 20 to 30 comments.
Or like even 12 to 18. So we figured, maybe 150, maybe a couple hundred people at most. So we were going to get some emails. We ended up getting like 4,000 emails of people wanting to work out, and at that point, I was like, dude. There's a lot of people hanging out there, coming out. So
but in the grand scheme of thing, what about the whole population of the world? Really, is 4,000 that many?
No, it's not. But if you think about us cultivating
I know, I'm just
tending the garden and looking at those, guys coming for us for information and workouts. I don't like to abandon people. My deal of leave no man behind, and so we needed a way to rebrand and come up with something. And so after some vision quest and a little bit of searching, I came on the fact that it would be really funny to do some puns with the term WOD and related it back to Johnny WOD.
Mm-hmm.
So we reskinned it with a kind of a cool 70s to 80s porn vibe to hence the Johnny WOD, and ended up kind of pulling off some stuff with it. So we've morphed CrossFit Football into Johnny WOD.
The programming on the site. Now the seminar, what's a little different is we've gone deeper into programming. Sprint progressions are a little different. Yeah. So if you've been to the seminar, it has evolved a little bit further.
Yeah.
And we've taken it off of kind of this CrossFit vibe to more of it's performance. It's sport, pure sport now, and athleticism.
Well, the opening talk really broaches the subject of what the whole seminar is about, and really what I've come to realize that after, this second career that I've started after my NFL deal ended, and now that I've gone into this other direction, the idea of fostering athleticism, and my belief that through training, you can not only develop athletes, but develop athleticism, and all things being equal, the more athletic a person is, the better they will do. And so really breaking down and defining athleticism allowed us to go back and start developing a program to foster athleticism. And even in the initial talk, what is athleticism? And really this weekend, Tex and I did it for the first time, or taught the first SSA seminar, and really had that conversation with people. I think that we hit them in the face of the fire hose because we asked them to think about some concepts and really just think about things that they had never really assessed. Because for a lot of people's perception, athleticism is kind of like either you're good looking or you're not. You're either athletic or you're not.
Right.
And if you're good looking, or if you're not good looking, there's nothing you can really do other than through some Photoshop and distance and darkness and drunkenness to really help you get through that. Which is actually Luke's entire game plan. Distance,
really
darkness,
is.
and drunkenness.
Yeah. Wait, let me back up. Yep, you're the one.
You're the one if I'm looking at But, so people have this kind of, you either have it or you don't. And then when you start talking about athleticism and being an athlete and everything, all of a sudden people kind of go into this pride, almost like it takes them back to third grade getting picked last in dodgeball because they were the worst.
Yeah.
And so people have
go
this,
into their shell, the fear of it.
Yeah, they have this little fear about the conversation. And, part of the thing, and I think what we run into is that, we always joke that the best trick the devil ever played was convincing the world that he didn't exist. The best trick the devil ever played was convincing the world that if you go hard, that is equal to athleticism.
Right.
And we know that just going hard and doing as hard as you want or doing a workout as fast as you want isn't necessarily athleticism.
Because it only gets you so far.
It only gets you so far. And then we talked about, fitness and athleticism being mutually exclusive, that you can be an incredible athlete and be terribly unfit. You can have massive amounts of fitness and be the fittest dude on the planet and be a terrible athlete.
Right.
But it just so happens if we can foster athleticism and develop fitness, then
Bing, bang, boom.
we should be able to do that. And then, and really the other big conversation we had was about speed. You don't necessarily have to be the best athlete to be fast. You don't have to have fitness to be fast, but speed is that universal equalizer. Yeah. Where you might be a little smaller, you might not be as good a player or this and that, but if you're fast, you're fucking fast.
Yeah, you can outperform.
So then we talk about how to develop speed and really got what is athleticism, how to develop athleticism, and then also how to develop speed and components of speed and strength and power and whatever. And so I was invigorated, really excited with how the seminar went down, and I think people really dug it. And I think it's just an evolution of the natural step of where CrossFit football took us and the conversation we're having now, which is a different conversation in 2016 than when I started in 2009.
Yeah.
I mean, Julien, who we have
let me pop in real quick.
Yeah.
So this is a beautiful thing because a common thread between the athleticism and the speed is movement, right? And we are absolutely thrilled to have Julien Pineau on, who is movement specialist, Invictus coach. He's got his Strong Fit thing blowing up. And we were talking before the show, John, like every seminar, I'd say in the past 4 or 5 months that I've been on, someone brings up Julien. And they're like, you got to cross paths with this guy. You guys are preaching the same method. You're going to learn so much from one another. So I guess, Julien, going back to what John was saying, like when we talk about athleticism, it's about seamless and effortless movement through all planes of motion, right?
Yep.
And what we were talking about before the show is people cannot move through all planes. They specialize in one pattern through one plane of motion, and that becomes their default, which is robbing from their athleticism.
Well, but you also have to remember that if your training program looks like nothing but bilateral hip hinge moving in a sagittal plane, and nothing you ever do is in a transverse plane, you rarely ever do X, Y, and Z, or Z and a Y axis, then is it really the fault of the person? So
no, they just don't know any better.
Yeah.
But before we get into let's let Julien introduce himself. How about that?
Let me just finish this one thought, and then I'm not going to talk to the rest of this thing. We talked at the seminar, and a huge thing for me is opportunity. That's entered that's something I developed over the last couple of years. This idea, whenever I talk to people about how they developed this or how they developed as an individual, it was always came back to they provided this opportunity to do it. And then we talked a great length about the seminar, and I was really able to weave that in as this common thread, being like, if you have only done, and a guy asked, well, why can't I do this? And I'm like, well, have you ever been shown this? Have anybody ever taught this? Have you ever had an opportunity to learn this or coach this or be coached or do any of these things? And he said, no. And I'm like, then why would you naturally assume that you could do it? And he's like, well, I've met a bunch of people that could just naturally do this. And I'm like, well, now you're talking about people have a different athletic intelligence and physical intelligence. And it's kind of, why is it that my one daughter at 2 years old had 1,000-word vocabulary. My other daughter had 50 words. And so you kind of think about it, and certain people have a better vocabulary of human movement and they develop it at different rates. The thing is we can get everybody there with work. We just have to identify where you're at and then start building progression to get you there. So opportunity. All right, Julien.
Julien, now the floor is yours, my man, after an hour already of talking. But if people haven't heard of you, give them the pitch. Like we said, 2 hour, 2 minute, whatever you want to do, bro.
I don't pitch. I just want to talk about everything John talked about. I'm a movement specialist, and so my goal is to create a system to assess and approach everything John talked about. Because we all know the problem with CrossFit being a sagittal plane, but there's a bunch of stuff missing in the programming. So what I want is to establish a system where we can analyze any training system. So I have a box, right? And then if I put the training system in the box, right away I can see where the imbalances are. So I like to use a box because you have to balance the box otherwise. So I have an analogy, there's a box in a shaft, right? The box has 4 corners. If the box is in balance, it hits the shaft, you get injured. So to make the box go up in the shaft, you have to put stress in it, favorable response to stress, which is called homeostasis. That's good programming. But so you cannot put more programming bigger than the box in a way. So the key is let's balance the box correctly. And so to me, I have 4 corners of the box. One of the corners is the planes of movement we were talking about, right? If you work everything in the sagittal plane, obviously you're going to create a certain number of issues that you were saying. But so for me, the first corner of the box is what is movement. It's either a load, a carry, or a hold. You see that in a lot of training also, where they imbalance in that sense. If you look at CrossFit, it's always loading. Outside of the CrossFit games, you don't see any carries. You don't see any holding for balancing to, gymnastic hold, stuff like that. And then the second corner of the box was the planes of movement and how important it is to hit, and even the medium plane, for example, to work left versus right, how important that is. And it's lacking in most CrossFit programs. Then the third corner of the box were all the energy systems, and the fourth corner of the box was all the types of contraction, which to me is very, very important, because certain muscle, evolution 101, we got given a body that function a certain way. There are certain guidelines, certain rules we have to follow. And if you look, certain muscles seems to have primary functions. So more type of contraction than another, and that's something we have to respect. If I look at the obliques, for example, the primary function of the obliques is to make sure your spine doesn't snap when you turn too fast, building the brakes correctly. So that means more toward eccentric contraction, right? That would be the first role of the obliques through evolution. And yet, most people train obliques through concentric, never building the brakes correctly. So that's going to lead into problem. And so my entire thing is to build like a system so we can start listing the inconsistencies of a program so we can move past that.
No, you're right on, and taking it into, I guess, the performance perspective, just jumping into what you said, obliques, that is one of the things that we see as a huge limiting factor for people when we go into shuttle runs, and teaching them how to plant the lower extremities of their body in kinetic alignment to abruptly reduce force. So you can use that force to go the other way. But they're not used to the isometrics or eccentrics of inertia pushing them over the top, and they end up rolling ankles, falling over, stumbling, looking like assholes. And we point back to hey, we were just doing side pillars, and none of you could hold a side pillar for more than 10 seconds. What do you expect you can handle that force?
Well, it's almost like something got lost in the conversation where you develop through stability through isometric contractions, and then once you develop stability, it's like the analogy when people ever ask me, well, be specific. Well, how many you can jump up and hold into a ring dip and just hold it in an isometric contraction
at the top?
Yeah, at the top, just perfect complete balance, stay in a nice hollow position, make everything perfect. And people are like, yes. I'm like, well, how long can you do it? And then, you know, and we've tested it and had people jump up and maybe they can do it for 3 or 4 seconds. Yeah, and then they start shaking. And I was like, how many of you guys looked and said, you know what, I'm going to develop stability with a straight arm and this complete perfect isometric contraction before I bend my arm and start doing eccentric concentric? Not a single person. And I'm like, how can you expect to actually master an eccentric concentric movement if you can't develop stability in isometric?
Yeah, at the end range, right?
Yeah, I mean, think about how many people you've seen squat, like carry the bar. Can they step back and hold the bar in a heavy loaded position, you know, pull their top rib down, squeeze their butt, show a perfect position before they descend into the squat? I watched people pick up a bar where I thought, there's no fucking way they're going to be able to squat this because they can't even maintain posture and position under load. And then they fucking somehow squat it. And I'm like, that is so ass backwards to me. That's why we did heavy walkouts. And that's why, you know, like he's saying, like heavy carries or heavy loads, being able to load the spine and be able just to create stability with some frontal or even, you know, backside load. So it's as if they just didn't talk about that. And, you know, part of the thing is it's hard to, I guess you could say it's hard to quantify power, I guess you could say, if we look at it like horsepower with isometric contractions. But yet we know for training, I mean, those are fundamental towards developing stability.
Right. Yes. So
yeah, that was the problem, is you can't really do it with numbers. So that's why I was doing it more from a box perspective. Because then if I look at a training system and I say, okay, you have no load, you have no carries, no hold, right? If I go through, let's say, CrossFit, you look at the type of contraction, it's always concentric. So I'm going to look at all the muscles that primary function are eccentric or isometric, and I know they're not going to be developed. So you look at hammies, you look at, you know, the lats, stuff like that. You go like, okay, so the lack of frontal plane means there's no lats. So when they carry overhead, they have to shrug. And so suddenly you are able to make certain predictions based on that model, going like, if your system does this, it allows me to know that you're not going to be able to do that. And so that's how I analyze it based on the system. Because the main difference between faith and science is the ability to make predictions. And so for me, the idea was to build a model that I can use to make predictions on how people are going to move. And if I can do that, then I know I'm right in the way I look at it. And so that was the entire idea about the box. It was to list the muscle, looking at primary functions, and look if you're training them correctly. If you're not, then I know you're going to be faulty in certain patterns. And then after I look at the planes of movement, the carries and everything, that allows me to see whatever the problem is. And so far, it has allowed me to fix athletes just looking at that model, putting them through the box.
Now, Julien, I know just kind of word of mouth that you have a pretty jiggy diagnostics system or approach. So when you're going through and you're putting these people in the proverbial box, like what tools are you using to identify it? Are you just watching them do a workout, or do you have a preferred set of movements?
Okay, so let me explain exactly how the system works. I'm going to use chess as an analogy. Like you guys know off chess, right? You've played it once or twice. Yeah, there you go.
I've lost plenty of times.
Yeah, no, texted my ass this weekend. I hadn't played in about 10 years, and I forgot all the rules.
You're a checkers guy?
Well, I used to play chess, and for some reason I was drawing a blank, and I was looking at my phone trying to get the rules, just getting butchered. I'm like, God damn it, I got to go. Go on.
So chess has three parts, if you want. They have the opening, the middle game, and the end game. That's the part of chess. So beginners, they always want the openings, but it's because it's easier. Like you learn the game really fast, and then you can make your friends and make progress right away, and everybody's happy. The problem with that is opening is just memorization. You don't understand the true nature of chess just by memorizing position, because every time you face a position you haven't memorized, you're screwed. And the middle game is more like toward the strategy of it, like how to, once you reach a certain stage in the game, how to get the pieces to move together and everything. The problem is the true way to learn about chess, the true nature of chess is in the end game, where you're going to take every piece separately and test them to see their strengths and weaknesses. So it's like a king and a pawn. That's when you're going to learn really the power of a pawn, or a king and a bishop. So the idea for me was to try to narrow movement down to each individual piece, so I could understand their strengths and weaknesses, right? So toward training, that would be like the opening is programming, right? That's memorization. That's the part everybody loves. That's the fancy stuff you put on the whiteboard. But it's not the true nature of movement. And teaching technical work, that would be the middle game. But there is still an end game we don't talk about. And so to me, my entire thing in the last few years was trying to figure out the end game. The end game is rotation. It's how to create tension. Rotation as in torque. Like every movement starts with tension, starts with torque, right? Like if you look at a rope is stronger twisted than straight. So it's all about creating torque. Torque you either create by rotating externally or internally, either at the hip or at the shoulder, right? Let's say if you want to pull an object toward you, upper body, you're gonna have to crank externally, which means you have to engage like almost without rotating the humerus, but creating tension to be able to engage your lat fully to pull, right? If I think about pushing, then it's the other way. It's internal rotation. Like where I'm going to engage the chest, all the pressing muscles, that's going to make me naturally is toward internal rotation. You're thinking punching, you're thinking gymnast on an iron cross, they always internally rotate because that's all pressing movement in order to engage the chest, the larger muscle, you have to internally rotate. So if you look at movement like this, it's either an internal or an external rotation. So the key was to divide the movement into one or the other. So you have 4 loading patterns. You have a pull, a push, a squat, and a hinge. So a pull is an external rotation, right? Whereas a push is more toward internal rotation. So right away that presents a problem because what is a catch on the snatch? Is that a pull or is that a push?
We'd be pushing.
Yeah, it'd be a push. Yeah.
Okay, so that means you're catching it internally rotated. Okay, how is that taught most of the time?
Active shoulders, I guess.
Well, actually, it should be taught as a rotation this way so you can see your lat this way, but people end up doing this in the internal rotation, and then they you can show your lats and be internally rotated. The problem is if you turn like this, like you just did, you engage your lat, but you disengage your chest. Okay, so you're going to show your lats and you're going to push forward. So now you got your lats and your chest activated. Now you're internally rotated. So I'm not talking about rotating the full bone completely. That would be displacement. You actually would lose the torque at the chest. The key is you're going to engage your lat and then engage your chest by pushing forward, and that's an internal rotation. If you look, that's going to be what the Chinese lifter look like on the snatch. Yeah. Well,
so the key is not to turn fully.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you watch those guys, they end up kind of stacking the lat over the rib, and then it's
exactly
almost as if they take the bar and they like create, I guess you could say, like a fulcrum where they're driving this way, but they're actually doing here. So they try to sandwich it, and then that's how they really get into that strong, stable position, and they have to fix back angle. The problem becomes in a lot of American people, they really struggle with trunk stability, and they can't sit in their hips. So then to be able to naturally sit in this position to create torque, they can't do it, and they end up getting here, and then they dump back, and then they have to externally rotate their position because they have the ability and the strength to sit within the position they need to be. So I mean, yeah. Oh yeah.
I agree with you completely. But if you look at a problem with that, that means you want that connection short head of the bicep pec to be as strong as possible, right? So if you never work that, you're going to have to go to external rotation in order, because you have, but that suddenly you're loading your T-spine like crazy. You have to lean forward. That makes the trunk stability even worse. And so if you don't understand the end game, the rotation, you can't teach it properly from the beginning. And so if you cut corners and you start externally rotated because it's easy, you're going to end up down the line with you either feed the problem or you fix it. So now you're feeding the problem more and more and more. But you can't explain that to someone until they understand the end game, what the piece is. And the piece is internal rotation to engage the chest that lines up everything properly.
What we found over the years is that most people that we work with are kind of similar to water in that if you pour water, it'll always find its level, it'll always find downhill. So what happens is you ask people to do, sorry. People want to execute these movements, and these are complex movements. Like this is a complex problem. I mean, if you watch a person do a snatch, for example, I mean, here they're loading their hamstrings in this position, they're pushing their knees back. I mean, they're using this bar in relation. I mean, it's basic if you think about it from like the idea of snatching a rock overhead to slam it like slam. But the minute that you take a bar and you start putting these positions, it gets more complex. And the problem becomes that they haven't developed the movement patterns necessary to tie them together. Because just jump in. and we're going to teach you to do this. And so what you're seeing, and I'm sure you fucking have noticed this, is people are trying to do something more complex than they have necessarily built the pieces to build this complex.
And
so now we're having to go back and say, hey, you can't do this. And the reason that you can't do this is because, one, nobody's ever taught you, but you've never been forced to put in this position. And to get in this position, you had to develop all of these pre-existing or prerequisite steps to just get you there. So what you're trying to do, and I'm as I'm listening to it, I'm figuring that this is what we do, where we see what you're doing and you're like, back it up. Let's break all these pieces down and get back to this starting place.
Yeah, mobility, stability.
Yeah, I mean,
efficiency.
Yeah, I mean, the big one too is mobility without stability is what?
Well, okay, wait. So wait, because exactly, but wait, because there's the entire thing. So I'm going to get to that. So for me, the key is, so if you can't internally rotate it properly because of lack of mobility, I can't teach you how to snatch. So to me, the key is always, I'm going to have to develop an exercise to teach internal rotation before you can snatch properly. Otherwise, you'll never snatch. And so that's the thing I did, was to create exercises that I call the openers to facilitate internal or external rotation so people can have mobility. But what is mobility? Flexibility is range of motion. Mobility is the capacity to the range of motion while maintaining torque.
Yep.
That's what mobility is. So the problem is never range of motion. The problem is always, can you maintain torque at that range of motion?
Sure. I mean,
so people externally rotate on the snatch because they can't maintain internal rotation at that range of motion. So if I can teach you better internal rotation, I will increase your mobility.
We had years ago when I owned a gym, we had these people from a yoga deal wanted to swap out with us. They were like, "Oh, we'd love to come in and teach some yoga." I'm like, "That's great. I'm happy to do your yoga stuff. You got to come do some training with us." These guys were we had 4 of them all come in, super flexible yogi type people. I mean, this was their whole deal. The more amazing thing was not a single one of them had any range of motion, even though they could sit in a squatted position, do all these, had great mobility or flexibility. The minute that we put them under load, whether it be a deadlift, whether it be a squat, whether it be any type of load, they instantly had no ability to get anywhere near full range of motion. They couldn't maintain posture and position. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, I've watched you guys sit in a perfect squat. Like, I've watched you guys do all these different things. The minute I put 65 pounds on your back, you could not do it. And they were even a little upset. They were like, why is it? I'm like, you can't maintain stability under load, so your body's not allowing you to get to full range of motion. And
because they can't maintain the proper torque. Because, I mean, if you increase range of motion, you decrease torque.
Yep.
So when I increase load, I decrease the torque, therefore I decrease mobility. So to me, I look at Olympic weightlifting, gymnastics, powerlifting as just an exercise of mobility.
Yep.
So the key is, for me, is always going back to the end game, is can I increase, let's say, for a snatch overhead, can I increase internal rotation? So when I look at an athlete, that's what I look at. I'm like, can you maintain internal rotation? Because if you can't, I don't care what you do, it's wrong. Even if you look perfect, it's still wrong. Because inside, you're not creating the proper torque. But so, by the way, so squat and a hinge. A squat on the way up is an external rotation to engage the quads. So what's a hinge then?
Well, the hinging, it would be of the hips. I mean, if we were to drive, like we teach, like if I were to drive a steel spike through your hips and your ability to bilaterally hip hinge, which is hinging, which is pretty much everything from deadlifting to squatting to kipping pull-ups to a kettlebell swing to—
So which rotation?
It's everything. I mean, 100% of what we see in terms of why we walk into any gym is going to be some form of bilateral hip hinging.
Mm-hmm. And so which rotation is that?
Should be internal.
It should be.
Exactly. And so how many people set up the deadlift internally rotated?
99%.
No.
They should, but they don't.
Wait. You said how? What's that?
How do they set up?
Externally rotate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're all setting up externally rotated on their deadlift.
Yes.
But so the key, for example, so this is why when people tell me, let's say they do GHD sit-up and hurt their back. Okay? So how am I going to look at it? What's a GHD sit-up?
Well, that's a hinge.
That's a hinge. So you should be internally rotated. Did you ever see someone do a GHD sit-up internally rotated?
Well, we do. I mean, but we
I know, but they don't, right? So what happens when they externally rotate? They kill the swivel. They do a back flexion extension.
The reason they do it is because to internally rotate, you have to have glute and back strength. So what they do, and the comment I made about water finding its level is that people end up cheating the movement pattern to favor what they can do, which is
of course
turning the toes out. Then they're teaching the hip flexor and the oblique and the lower quad and the lower pelvis. So then it allows them to do it.
Yeah, no, of course, I agree with that. But to brag about habit, they have to understand it's not enough to tell them you're doing it wrong. You have to tell them how to do it right. Exactly. And so they do have a bad patterns. But to me, the key to fix the bad patterns is to understand where it starts. Yeah. And it starts by the fact that they externally rotated, therefore killing the swivel because flexion extension is what they're good at.
Sure.
And that's why their back hurts. So whenever people are getting hurt, I always look at the movement pattern based on internal or external rotation to see if the pattern is correct. And so by narrowing down like that is allowing me to do to look at an athlete and get to look at what the problem is in a much simpler way.
Sure.
So I always go toward, for me, that's the end game, is which rotation are you using? Because if I can teach people to internally rotate correctly, then chances are that when they go to the next movement, it's going to be a lot easier to go, for example, for a GHD sit-up. I've had people that could not do a GHD sit-up without back pain in the same session, just by showing them how to crank to internal rotation, taking most of the stress away from their back. Because it's not like we don't know why, but I have to find a way to get people that are not necessarily the 1% to do it correctly.
Yeah.
And by teaching them the end game, where the rotation is, that has simplified my life so much. Because otherwise I can teach them how to deadlift, and they might look good, but they're doing it wrong.
Sure.
And so
it makes total
by understanding rotation, it was the key.
No, I mean, the one thing we run into, and it sounds like by alleviating it, is people get butt hurt. Like you're doing this. Well, this is how I've been coached, and people really glob onto it. But I mean, even when we teach our squat or toes forward model, knee tracking on the instep, and even this weekend, the look of pretty amazing to see the look on people's faces. And we had a text brought in a girl who's a strength coach for Georgetown, and I watched her initial squat. I had to fix it to how I wanted it. All of a sudden, she was getting DOMs as she was squatting 5 reps. She's like, my legs are getting sore. I've never felt my hamstrings or my quads.
When the instant onset.
Well, that's what I said. I was like, the only time I ever got DOMs during a set was when we were doing 20 rep squat, and I think I was at like 415, and I got to number 17, and my legs got so sore I ended up like fucking collapsing. But
she was also thinking the big picture, like the end game, like Julian's talking about, versus a squat for a squat.
Yeah, she sent me an email that was really nice. She's like, honestly, I learned more in a weekend than I did with all the certifications, everything I did. She's like, nobody really talks about these complex movement patterns and necessarily why they do them. We squat this way. Well, why do you squat this way? Well, that's the most efficient. For what? And I
put up the biggest number.
It says who?
And speaking of numbers, did you give her Tex's number? I forgot. The future Mrs. Tex McQuilkin?
I thought she could be the future Mrs. Tex McQuilkin.
Long con. Hopefully she doesn't listen to this, guys. Come on.
I met her. I met her. She seemed like a really nice girl, and she was cute. I was like, Tex, I'm like, this girl's great. I mean, you could have brought this girl under your wing and brought her along.
You just ruined his chances right now. But
I've never seen Tex blush so much on the podcast.
Oh, come on, guys. You're just killing the poor guy.
he just hung up.
That's our goal. I mean, if we ever get
exactly
to land a blow. Did you really hang up?
No, I think he just muted his video.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm almost blushing for him.
Well, no, I mean, what's great is we got a French guy on. I mean, the French. I mean, isn't it about love and passion? I mean, he can probably give you something.
Totally, man. Well, that's why I win the seminars. It's my French accent that does it.
I was going to say, I mean, you know what? I'm sure people take criticism better from people like with foreign accents, where I always think like, you watch all these movies and like, the English guy is like the evil dude. And you kind of root for him. You're like, is it the English accent? Is it the French accent? Like,
No, when I say you suck, they go like, yeah, but that's cute the way you say it.
Exactly. And then when we say you suck, they're like, I'm telling on you.
I'm going to write a negative review that you were mean to me. I'm like, oh, God.
On Yelp.
What were we talking about?
No idea.
Kelly, that's an optional edit out. I would imagine that we're going to keep that in.
We're talking about reverse engineering movement from the game and now teaching the movements and working towards the program.
Yeah. Let's do it. Let's talk about it.
Okay. So let me use an example. Let me use an example real quick, because that's something people don't think about that much. So the bicep is a very interesting muscle. The bicep can help so you got the long head of the bicep that helps for external rotation, which is a pull, and the short head of the bicep that helps toward internal rotation, that is a push. So if you do a bicep curl toward external rotation, you're helping the pull. If you do a bicep curl toward internal rotation, you help the push. So the problem with that is if I send my athletes to do a bicep curl to help on a bench press or a snatch, and she does it with the wrong rotation, she's making the problem worse. So it's not what you do, it's how you do it. The entire key of this for me was it's not enough to tell people accessory work, like go do bicep curl. Okay, but which one? The one that's going to help you pulling or the one that's going to help you pushing? Because depending if you're internally or externally rotated, it changes everything. So that's why you see powerlifters naturally going toward the hammer curls to help on the bench press, because the hammer curls goes toward internal rotation. So if you don't understand the purpose of rotation, you can do a bicep curl and actually fuck up your snatch. Whereas if you do it correctly, you will actually help the snatch. So again, it's not what you do, it's how you do it. So if we don't go through the end game, people will never understand how to do what we want them to do correctly. So that's why I go back toward the end game. And at my seminar, I mostly have coaches. And I'm like, guys, it's not enough to teach technique. There is an end game. There is a step past technique. If you just teach technique, like they're going to manage a way to sprint with their, pigeon-toed while externally rotated. And that's going to fuck them up. So it's always the end game first. Like people need to understand the why and the how before you can tell them what to do. So my seminar is not the what. It's not to teach them technique. It's not to teach them any of that. It's to teach coaches the why and the how so that they can take their people and go make them better with the programming and everything. But if we teach technique and programming without teaching rotation, people will fuck it up every time. That's why you see people that have perfect form on a deadlift, and yet they fuck up their back every single time. And so that's when they come see me, because first they go see the doctor, then the PT, then the massage therapist, then the acupuncture, then the voodoo guy, then the guy that sells snake oil, and then they come see me. So I got an easy job. So they come see me when they were about to die. But then that's why I had very good success fast, because I was like, yeah, you can't hinge. If you can't hinge, I don't care what your form looks like, you're still doing it wrong. It looks like you're doing it right, you're not. And so I go back to the end game every time. And that's really the way I look at problems and movement patterns incorrectly, is rotation first. But so that gives you an idea on also the point of the hammy. Like whether the lateral head or the medial head, they have a different purpose. So to engage the medial head to hinge properly, you have to internally rotate. Otherwise, and then it leads from there, basically. And so that was very important for me to have a system developed that way, so I can take any problem from anybody coming to me and decompose it as the root problem and not just a technical issue, because we've been there plenty of time when somebody can look like they're doing it right and yet they're doing it completely wrong. So, and then again, like there's many coaches out there that need to understand how to get their people from the beginning to move correctly. Otherwise, they keep feeding the problem. And so that was, for me, that was the goal of the end game, was we need to narrow it down to the smallest possible piece, just that from there we can make predictions. The key for me is, can you make a prediction? If you cannot, then it's a face-based argument. That was my problem with external rotation on everything that is overhead, is when they start to say, show your armpit, which is right, but without internal rotation, that means you're forcing external rotation. I mean, give me a movement in sport where a pressing movement that is externally rotated.
Can't do it.
You can't find one. Look at a punch. Outside of Chinese Kung Fu movie, have you ever seen someone punching externally rotated?
No, everybody, as they go punch, it actually comes this way. I mean,
exactly.
Chinese Kung Fu.
I have seen people do this, but they're...
Yeah, not in the power. Yeah, in Kung Fu movie you have.
Yeah.
In real life, in MMA, you've never seen it.
Yeah, you have to really look outside of you'd have to find some fringe bullshit.
Yeah, not in sport, basically.
I mean, even if you were to do, like if you watch Bruce Lee's 1-inch punch, what does he do? He's rotating this way. He's not rotating out. Well, actually, I have to watch that again.
No, trust me. He rotates in. Nobody rotates out.
External rotate. Well, we also know that this position is not as strong as this position.
Exactly. When you have dumbbells in your hands, have you ever been stronger going toward external rotation?
No, but most people we have found are actually stronger at the dumbbell with a neutral grip. If they're
but they still press toward internal. They're still not pressing, opening the hands.
Yeah, very few people bring them down here and then rotate this way and turn an external rotation.
So no matter what, they're going internally. When you push in the NFL, have you ever tried to push toward the outside, like externally rotated? That's not where the power is.
No. As I would punch, everything would be here. So if you got to remember, we always punch with the thumbs up.
Yeah.
So a punch here because then it makes your elbow. Because if you externally rotate too much and your hand is over, then effectively what this does is it locks the elbow. That's
a technical aspect. That's a technical aspect of where you place your hand. But the rotation goes toward this way. You will not find one movement in sport where people can go. Look at gymnasts. On ring work, are they ever externally rotated on the push pattern?
No, I mean, the only time I ever saw anybody, this is kind of strange now that I think about it, and I always appreciate when people let me to think. I watched a guy punch too far this way as his hand was over here. He was too far out, and he got loaded and ruptured his bicep.
Yeah.
And if you think about the bicep, how it loads, it has to. If your hand is here and it loads this way, opposed to here loading back, which was always weird because you see guys do reverse grip bench. There was Anthony Clark that used to reverse grip bench, and the dude.
I know, but there's always that one guy, man.
Well, yeah,
but still.
5'4", 400 pounds.
Exactly.
2-inch long arms. So he was like, it was a shorter range of motion. But yeah, that's really the only time I've ever seen anybody do.
Yeah.
And usually the reason that people do that is because they end up hurting their biceps tendon somewhere in their shoulder. And by doing this, it kind of turns it off. But if you think about torque and power, they can't develop it. So it's interesting. Yeah, no, it's good.
Yeah, and so that was my major argument with the snatch. I was like, a power jerk. Everybody agrees that you will internally rotate. So I'm like, so you internally rotate on a power jerk, you externally rotate on the snatch. When do you switch from one to the other?
You know, ironically, I was thinking back before my Olympic lifting and my ability to go overhead really fucking decreased when I basically ruptured my interspinatus and my supraspinatus. So, yeah, it sucks because now my lat has to do all the stabilizing. So for me to go overhead, it's just. So I actually went and got an MRI the other day, and they're like, if you ever want to be able to have any stability overhead, they're going to have to reattach this because your lat can't do it. But as I was remembering before I fucked it up, and I remember how I fucked it up was actually when I was trying to do muscle-ups because, a 300-pound dude needs to do muscle-ups. Mm-hmm. And I remember it slipped this way, and that's when it tore. But when we were snatching a lot, we were taught to actually rotate this way.
I know.
That. And I was remembering Bergner was like, I want you to actually, as the bars in your hand, try to rotate this way. Mm-hmm. And I remember being never as strong as if I was like, well, why not? I can show here, but if I actually torque back this way, then I get to use my bicep and I get to use more of what's in. And he said his chest. I never thought about that. But like I always thought about sandwiching the two, that if I can rotate here while doing this, I can effectively torque the bar into a better position.
By the way, speaking of that, Coach Bergener came to one of my seminars at Invictus, and he agreed that I'm right. So he actually, he went on a podcast and actually agreed that I'm right about internal rotation.
Wow.
Well, do you think it's also like a misinterpretation of like a show the armpit? For us, what we tend to see is a misinterpretation of hips back on a squat. People initiate an excessive, like you're talking about, excessive anterior pelvic tilt versus we prefer more of a neutral hip relation to the spine and sitting back more than flicking that hip back because
but that's the problem. Yeah, that is the problem of cues without understanding.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. End game, right? Going back to
end game. Like whenever you talk about hip position and show the armpit, you're talking about the middle game, how you put everything together. If you don't understand how the pieces work separately, you can't make them work together well. That's the principle of chess. Like you're going to go in the end game, you're going to be screwed because you don't understand how to win at the end. If you don't understand how to win at the end, you're going to get into that situation in a poor position. You're going to lose against a skilled opponent. And life is a very skilled opponent. You're going to be in a position where you're not going to be good at it. Not everybody's gifted at everything, unfortunately. And so, but the key is, so Eddie Hall, he knows how to deadlift, okay? But how do I make him better if he gets to a position where naturally he's not good at? I mean, where he doesn't come naturally. Then what? Then I need the system, a model in place to be able to explain that correctly. And that's what the end game is for. It's not for when you do it correctly and it's smooth and it flows. Great. What if it doesn't flow? What if I have someone who's not gifted? What if I have grandma who comes and has a hip problem because she can't squat properly? That's when the end game is for, because then I can go back to the smallest possible denominator, look at where the problem starts, and maybe improve this, and that in turn will make her better squatting. Whereas if I just make her squat, she's going to break because she's not doing it correctly to start with.
Sure.
And that was the problem with rotating to show the armpits. That's not incorrect. It's totally correct to show the armpits. But the problem is because they didn't understand internal rotation, they let go of it. And by letting go of it, they fucked up everybody.
Yeah.
And so that it always comes down to the in game. Always. And that's the same thing on a hinge. Is people think I'm talking knees out, knees in. I was like, that's adduction. That's not rotation. There's a difference.
Yeah.
So they were like, oh, you're going to have valgus knees. I'm like, that's adduction. I'm talking about creating torque, not necessarily moving the bone. Just what moves the bone is the muscle and the tendons anyway. Let's have the muscle and tendons going toward torque, to an internal rotation, and that will set up everything. So if you try internal rotation correctly, you'll notice your obliques engage properly when you're bent over. If you go externally, relaxes your stomach, your organs leave the spine. You're going to fuck up your back. Your body knows. Your body knows how to do this correctly. You just fuck it up along the way.
Yeah, I mean, and we really found that foot position was really the biggest factor for us in terms of teaching that. If we can actually, like similar, if you can get your foot in that vertical position, and then we know that you can keep that, and then as you start creating torque, it allows you to sandwich between the two, and then you kind of drive against them. The problem becomes is that if you put your foot out here, and all of a sudden you drive, now all of a sudden people roll up,
exactly.
They don't get a big toe, or if they're in this position and God knows that their knees collapse, now you're having, violent tibial torsion, torn ACLs, and, if I could rupture.
No, it would be horrible.
So but that's what we see in real time. And
yes.
If it's an air squat, they're not really, it's fucking gravity.
Lower risk.
It's low risk.
Yeah.
The problem is now you have people that are trying to take what they're doing in 50 air squats, and now they're trying to be like, hey, I want to squat a 1RM, I want to squat a 405, and I'm like, okay, let's be smart. Let's put you in a position to be successful, but also fight another day and come back and do it tomorrow.
No, and exactly. But my thing, what I've noticed with people is until I could make them figure out the end game, they couldn't do it the way I wanted. I was like, no, that's not what I said. But then you reach that moment where you tell them something and you go, dude, I did not say that. Mm-hmm. And you told me to do this. That's not what I said. Mm-hmm. And so, because I was trying to teach them the middle game and they did not understand. If you don't understand what a rook does, you can't play it. And so I was like, okay, this is not working. We need another step. We need the step where I can take the athletes and go, okay, I'm going to put you in a position where you need to internally rotate with certain exercise that I created. And I'm like, okay, do you feel now can you create, even if it's not a lot, do you feel how to create torque the way I want? Yes. And then I took them back to the exercise, and now they could create torque the correct way. That doesn't mean they were ready for the max rep because they never been in that position. Now you're going to have to earn your position all the way to your max rep. But at least we were on the way there. Now suddenly I can put you through a program to get you there where we can build up, because before that, there was no way to build up correctly. Because from the get-go, they were doing it wrong because they did not understand how to create torque properly.
So, Julien, when did you have this epiphany about endgame, and what were you doing before then?
Before that, I was fucking it up. And the endgame, I had an epiphany about 8 months ago.
No, you know what's interesting is we've had people on our podcast almost like this where they've arrived at the same conclusions that we have, just from different ways.
Yeah,
and it's always interesting. Like, dude, I can think of countless amount of people that we're not necessarily, we're peripherally know, but we're not directly involved with, that come to the same conclusions that we do and see these same things. And you kind of are like, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. And then you run into other people that this is, even though I've heard of Julien, I've never met, it's our first time really rapping, but I'm listening to it, I'm like, shit, this sounds like our conversations. Or I'm like, are you sure we haven't met?
Yeah.
Because, but it comes down to, if you're a observant person and you've been doing something and you are looking for patterns and models like we do, which is a big deal for me, I'm always looking for patterns. you go through enough models and patterns, and then all of a sudden you realize you're like, wait a minute, something's broken here. What am I seeing? How does this fit? And then you start trying to change, and you get to the point, like you said, what I was teaching wasn't getting people, and you're like, well, it's not what I said. This is what I want to say. So then you talk, and it's the same thing we do. I mean, we show people, I want you to do this. When you can't do this, I'm going to show you how to do this, and then I'm going to show you how this translates into what you were doing. And this is why you're doing it wrong, is because you can't do this, which is exactly where he's like, you want to create torque, I'm going to show you what torque is here. Now I need you to be a smart enough or good enough or even just globally aware person to be able to translate 1 to 2 and say, well, if I could do it here, you should be able to do it here. And then that's practice. And then they have to basically, perfection of movement and this. And a life of trying to make better movers out of people that are doing a training system that doesn't necessarily foster movement is fucking tough.
Yeah. It will.
But that was my frustration. Was started like the reason I came up with that model, like I call that the movement matrix, was that I fixed a bunch of lifters who were on their way to be so screwed up they would never lift again, or at least not competitively. And I had one like that, was Ali Ludwig. Like you're gonna see her at the Olympics for Olympic weightlifting. She's at Sean Waxman's gym, and snatches. She's a 90 kilos, snatches over 97 kilos. She's only 23, so she has a bright future. When she came to me, she couldn't lift an empty barbell overhead without pain in her neck, the trap being jacked, and losing feeling completely in her left arm, stuff like that. And so I fixed her, and it's great, and it makes me excessively happy. What keeps me up at night is how many I didn't fix. Mm-hmm. And the fact that I'll never see them.
Do you live in Torrance?
Yeah.
Where in Torrance?
I used to live in Torrance. Now I live in the world, really, because I'm all over the world. But I was I'm at Paula Court, 10 minutes from Sean.
Okay. Yeah, no, I grew up in Torrance. So Palos Verdes, Torrance.
I have a story about that one, by the way, in 1 second. And so the key for me was, how do we need a model that so coaches can apply so they can fix those people. Because if I do it just on the people I see, I'll fix 20 people. If I can show coaches how to approach it correctly, I'll fix 1 million. And that's why I did the movement matrix. I was like, we need a binary system, a yes or no, a 0 or 1, where that's how you approach movement. They either do this or they do that. And so me being good at fixing people is not enough. I wanted to create a model so that every coach can use that model and put through his people through and at least understand the root of the problem. After they're good enough to fix them, I don't know. But at least I've given them an understanding of where the problem starts. Yeah. And so that was the reason for the system, because we can do better as a human race. I am tired of seeing athletes that they are 10 weeks from getting fixed or never lifting again. Mm-hmm. I'm tired. We can do better as a human race.
So, Julien, another quick question. We're talking a lot about training and lifting. Do you work at all with field sport athletes, rugby, football, soccer, stuff like that?
Not football. I had some golf players. I had some rugby players. I had a bunch of people coming. I like to train pro athletes, but it's a hobby. My goal is to have a system so that when grandma walks through the door, I can fix her as well. Mm-hmm. I had enough people that were truly in pain, like real pain, that you can see the humanity is taking away from them a little bit, because pain will break you eventually. And I had people coming to me where you could tell, like, it was back surgery and then more back surgery and stuff like that. And it's fixable. Like, it's just a pattern, a bad pattern. They didn't get hit by a car. This was just being created one after another. So I'm like, we can fix this. There has to be a way to do this. That gap between PT and performance training is so big. People get lost in the middle and get killed. And that's not, I refuse to live in a world like this.
Well, or the even bigger one is the surgery to physical therapy and then back to training.
Yes.
Like, I mean,
exactly.
If I got, I mean, I shit you not, if I got 5 to 10 emails a day to my Raven account about people that are like, I had this injury, I had this surgery, I went to the PT ended, I am nowhere near ready to get back to where I need to be. What do I do? Yep. I mean, and it's like that is that is such a big question to send somebody an email, and I usually do. I just forward my console link, and I'm like, dude, you're like asking me to diagnose a car over the phone with a car I've never seen without even telling me the model or what's wrong with it. And I got an email the other day. I wrote something on like low testosterone and cortisol and all this for the blog. And this lady's like, I just got I went to a naturopath. I got androgen testing done. I have no cortisol or testosterone. Can you help me? Or
what program should I follow?
Or no, what should I do to get it back on? And I literally was like, like that is, or like, what should I do to build it back up? And I remember like, and I just forwarded a console link with like, are you serious? Like, this is like, first of all, what did the naturopath say? Two, you don't give me any value. Like it's, and I, like, I'm sure, Julien, you've run into people that are like, I'm in pain, and you're like, can you be more specific? Is it emotional? Is it mental pain?
Every day.
Yeah. And then, but yeah, it's, and it seems as if, and this is something that I have to remind people, I'm like, you're doing this for enjoyment. This is, this isn't your job. This isn't what you do. It's not like, my former job where I got paid to do this pain. People are doing this like, I'm an accountant. I work here. I'm an account manager. I do this. I sell mortgages. I'm a lawyer. And I go to this place and am training for something and fuck myself up where it basically destroys the quality of my life. But I can't say, and I'm like,
how many? So,
like,
Julien,
that shit blows my mind.
At our seminar, we responsibly ask, like, hey, who has an injury or a condition or whatever? And it amazes me how this is a recreational thing for a lot of these people. It amazes me how many people have trained themselves into an injury. I would say over 50%, and that number is
way more than that. Like, because they're saying injuries, some don't raise their hands. Ask them how many of them have shoulder pain.
Yeah, there you go. Shoulder pain, hip pain, back pain.
It's 95%, man.
We had a guy come to our seminar. I remember it was in Austin, and the guy walks in, and he like walks beelines over to me. I'm like, "What's happening? How you doing?" He goes, "I came to seminar to have you help me with my squat." I was like, "All right, what's wrong with your squat?" I have shooting knee pain to the point where I can't walk up and down. He goes, I can't walk up and down stairs without my knees buckling because, you think about patellar tendonitis so bad that the tendonitis, turns off the quad and his knees buckle. So going downstairs, his knees buckle. He's to the point where I have to wear patella bands. Basically you put a tight band on, it cuts the patella in half and shortens the lever. I have to wear patella bands 24/7. Like, it's affecting my entire life. And I'm like, have you thought about not squatting? And he's like, well, no, I'm training. And he's giving me this whole thing. I'm like, so what do you do? You're a professional? And he's like, no, I'm I forgot what he did, but it was, a corporate job. And I'm like, all right.
I'm corporate comptroller.
Yeah,
I got to make sure records retention's
exactly.
on. Yeah.
So we go to squat, and I was like, here's what I want you to do, man. Like, we're going to go through all this stuff. We're going to do a bunch of movement. When we get barbells, come fucking get me, and I'll coach your group. So we go get in it, and I'm like, let me see you squat. The dude literally, as he forward position, he literally drops straight into his squat. His knees shoot over his toes like 8 inches, right? Externally, anterior pelvic tilts this way, right? And almost like he's dive bombing at a 45 into this thing. And I'm like looking at him like, ooh. So he stands up. I'm like, let's squat together. So I like put like one hand on his chest and like pull his hips into mine.
That lucky guy.
Oh, he got.
Are you sure it wasn't just the contact that he had with your groin that fixed him?
Did something push him back up? That's what I want to know.
I was like,
and he had to go up really fast because, I see what happened.
I told him I wanted him to drop it like it's hot. I'm like, let's pretend I'm freaking you at the club.
This is the first Johnny one?
It was an assisted lift.
As he goes and squats, I literally took my hand and pulled his hips back. And I got the dude to sit back. I'm like, I want you to pretend like you're sitting on a toilet. I remember doing this awkward, we're going to squat together thing.
That makes me nervous.
And the dude stands up and he like turns around and like his girl's like, that looked really good. And I'm like, it did look good. But he has like, how the knee pain, 0 knee pain. Proceed to get this guy to squat fine. I see the dude like 3 years later and he walks over to me and he's like, no knee pain, it all went away. And I remember thinking to myself, this dude trains in a gym. Like, this isn't even his job. Like, this is so basic. Like, how is it that people get stuck in these movement patterns? And I'm, dude, you see it as much as we do it, and you're in a position where you're like, I have to fix these guys. What, do you almost see things tying together like somebody has a shoulder and a knee, or that it's almost like people have, if they have bad movement, I guess if we split upper and lower, like I have a bad shoulder with a bad right shoulder, bad right knee. I have a hip, I have a shoulder, I have an ankle. I mean, do you see it kind of across the entire spectrum, or is it usually isolated to one thing?
No, I see the body as a unit, always. So everything is connected to me. But like the guy who has a bad shoulder, usually he's squatting with the bar slanted on his back. Because, you know, he can't take it because the lat is off. So that's crushing one way. If the bar is crushing him right way, he's going to try to squat with a straight bar. So that means he's going to shoot his hips under the bar on the same side. That tilts him to that side. So the opposite knee gets fucked up. It's when my knee hurts. I'm like, well, yeah, because you can't put the bar on your back correctly.
Sure.
And so that's when they go back to sandbags, by the way. But so I think it's connected. That's the second part of my system, was to establish the elements like this of always. I use pyramids because it's easier to remember. But for me, I have what I call the S pyramid, which is the bottom of the pyramid is always structure. Then from there, I go to our stabilization and then specialization. So I have pyramids like this, and I look at people through those pyramids like a filter, if you want, to see where the problem are. But for me, it's always connected. The body is a unit. It is not a car. You don't get to have one piece fucking up while the other one does nothing. So it's always very important to connect everything. But so you can fix people, but that's not what worries me. What worries me was the guy's coach.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing I always, and I realize, Greg Glassman made a very observant statement, and we use it quite often when we talk to people about coaching and whatnot, is, people fail at the margins of their experience. That if your experience only takes you here, then you're going to fail at the deal. And the problem becomes that, and it's hopefully it's a little bit better today than it was a few weeks ago, where you have a guy who, basically gets fired from his mortgage job, goes and takes a CrossFit seminar, and next thing he's opening a gym and he's training people. And, whenever I ask people, I'm like, okay, so what did you do before this? What is your history? Like, you're out there, you're a run coach, but yet you played water polo in high school and you never ran. Like, you're coaching power lifters, but yet you've never stepped on a platform. Yeah. We ran into that in football all the time. We would have guys who were football coaches that never fucking did the job. And the problem with that is they can sit and they can observe things. Like you said, they can see those first two levels, but they don't ever understand the deep meaning and why you do the things that you do. And I remember my offensive line coach in Philadelphia, Juan Castillo. Juan was a linebacker, really student of the game. But I remember talking with him on some just very complex things, like even that punching with the thumb up, grabbing, and then being able to control people this way with, internal, external rotation based on here to be able to drive them almost, and really small little complex things like getting down in your stance. And instead of rotating out this way to push off your instep, rotating your knee this way so that I could drive and use my hip and be more explosive off the ball. And talking to him about these things, and him coming back and filming these clinic things because he wanted to be able to take these to other coaches and talk to them because he didn't understand them. And I remember filming all this clinic film. What are you going to do? He's like, well, when I go teach my coaching clinics, I'm going to talk about this shit. I'm like, so what are you going to do? You going to talk about it? He's like, no, I'm just going to show your video. I'm like, all right, well, that makes sense. But that level of understanding is really what we're running into, especially with coaches today, is all they're doing is they are seeing or hearing who they deal, and then they're regurgitating it, and they're fucking everybody up. And then you're like, and I'm sure you've seen this too. You go work with somebody, and you're like, who taught you how to do this? Or more importantly, where'd you learn this? And they tell you, and you're like, God damn it. I need to go kill that dude to get rid of this fucking bad movement. It's But
that's why I do the seminars, though, because a lot of those coaches, they most of them don't mean bad. They mean well. They just they can't figure it out. They just don't know, which is not an excuse. Don't get me wrong, but the fact is, where do you go anyway? Because you can't learn calculus without understanding basic math. Where do you learn basic math of movement? You don't. You do that on your own. You learn it on your own. You took a book and you learned basic math on your own, and from there you went into calculus and you were a good athlete and everything. Most of them are not like that. They don't have, they can't do that. So I was like, okay, so either I'm going to bitch about it or I'm going to try to fix it.
Well, the way that it should work, and at least for me it worked, was I observed movement through technique, which was football. And then I saw what worked and what didn't work. And then I would go back and say, all right, if I do this, this is successful. And if I don't do this, this is successful. But you have to realize that I was using my technique in terms of how it relates to another person. And then that person creates force and movement. And then you go through all this kind of dance. And I knew what wins and losses were. And I figured out what a perfect human movement for my job was based off of wins and losses and finding it in real time. I knew that if I did this, and there were guys that were way more gifted than me athletically who could get away with more. Like I remember watching Brian Waters and Will Shields and these guys do shit that I knew was wrong, but because they were so gifted, it didn't matter. Where I'd be like, I can't do that. If I do that, I will fucking lose because I know that's wrong movement. And so that was a huge deal, almost more than anything, was I knew what was right, and I saw the most talented dudes do it wrong and still win, and I was like, yeah, that's all fucked up. But yet they were good. And so the problem becomes is we start developing training systems and observations and models based off of the most gifted in the world. So if I were to go develop an offensive line clinic technique off of Will Shields, it wouldn't apply because fucking that guy is one of the best to ever play. That's why he's in the Hall of Fame and played 14 years. So like and this is the thing where it's like we do this just naturally. Like you take a look at like the best Olympic lifter in the world or this guy, and he just happens to have a very unique skill set that allows him to do his job better than anybody else. But then what do? We try to see that. We try to extrapolate back and think, well, he's the best. Well, he might not be the best technician. It's like you watch Paradimos pull the bar, and the dude is so fucking dynamic and so explosive that people are like, oh, he's trying to do these things. I'm like, have you watched him pull the fucking bar off the ground? Like his ability to pull the bar and pull himself is like no other athlete I've ever seen. But then they had other things in like the training halls of him doing things, and the dude's doing like a flat-footed 60-inch jump over like over a dowling piece in a rack, like side, like one step over and then lands and like effortlessly, and you're like, all right, that dude's fucking incredibly athletic and gifted and dynamic and all these other things. But the problem becomes that what you have to do is almost start. And you from what you said, sounds like you've done it, where you create a set of systems that exposes people's weaknesses, and then you have to be able to go back and show them, be like, okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to do it your way, and then exposes the weakness. Now I want you to do it this way. Do you see the difference? Now, can you replicate the difference? Now, can we translate it to movement in terms of these different, positions, snatch, clean, jerk, whatever you want to use it for?
But so we know how to do it. What I want now is to be able to create a system so we can teach it to lesser capable coaches.
And so
we need that because there's only two of us and hundreds of thousands out there.
And one of our big lines is a coach needs a coach, and kind of what your system is providing an opportunity for them to see that feedback. And most gym coaches, they just train alone or with coaches as similar efforts, so they don't see where they're failing. And your system would provide that opportunity to, make them aware and conscious of their movement mistakes. And
mine is just the background. Mine is not designed for the middle game or the end game. So I will never take people to the Olympics. That is not my goal. My goal is to allow a system like that's quantum mechanics versus cosmology, if you want. Quantum mechanics is a very, very small. Cosmology is a very, very big. A guy who's very good at quantum mechanics is not going to go and do cosmology. But in order to do cosmology, you have to understand the very, very small. Because that's understanding the basic of how the universe works is going to allow you to calculate how it works on the big scale. It's a little bit the same thing. We need to have a system that is simple enough, not simplistic enough, simple enough. There's a huge difference between the two. There is an elegance in simplicity. Simplistic is not helping. But the key is to go back to the smallest possible denominator, that it becomes simple enough that we can have a system based on that shows where the problem starts. Now, that's not the end of the problem, because knowing where the problem starts is only the first step. But we need that first step. Because most coaches out there, they're only going to change technique based on what they know of that technique. I've been taught this way, so if you don't squat that way, then it's wrong. But that's not coaching. Coaching is, okay, you are not loading your hammies, so therefore you're not internally rotating correctly. Let me teach you how to internally rotate correctly. Now you know how to load your hammies. Now if I say, when you squat, please load your hammies, they can do it. Whereas before that, if I just said you're squatting wrong, who cares? I'm not getting through. There's a moment, me knowing there's a problem is not enough. I need you to know there's a problem. So I need a system where coaches can explain to their people what they are doing wrong. Instead of saying you're doing it wrong, I want coaches to be able to go to their people and explain them the why and the how. Let me tell you, so they can tell their people, let me tell you why you're doing it wrong. You're not loading your hammies. You know how you load your hammies? You internally rotate. Let me show you how to do this. Do you understand now the difference? Good. Can we take that to the squat, please? Yes. Okay. So now you feel the difference of squatting with hammies without squatting without hammies. Now that person understands. Now they can get better. But before that moment, that epiphany, they could never understand squat correctly. And so maybe some will find out eventually, but eventually means usually injuries in the meantime. Means we're getting fucked up. And some people will never get it anyway. We need to be able to empower coaches with a system so that they can apply it to everybody coming into their gym.
Yeah,
so that's what I want.
That's a great point. Most effective way to get buy-in is to show versus just tell them over and over, and that feedback is essential. Kind of moving
the why and the how, always.
Exactly. Reference point that I like to make at seminars is moving, just squatting, pressing, all that. We can overcome our inefficiencies because we have all this space. But then imagine a swimmer in the water, right? Gravity is fighting down, and they have to be as efficient as possible. But the swimmer has that immediate feedback that kind of us in the room on the field do not have.
And that's exactly that. For me, was to find that feedback. So that feedback that's where the internal rotation, that the rotation to create torque comes in. Because I have certain exercises when I'm like, did you feel that particular way to create torque? I'm like, yes. Okay, then you're going to apply this to a more complex movement like pressing or things like that. And they get it right away because they're like, oh, that's how it's supposed to feel. So instead of talking to the neocortex part of the brain, which is memorization, you can talk to the limbic part of the brain, which is the why and the how, that emotional when they go, I felt that movement, now I understand the why I have to do it that way. And that's how you win. Telling people what to do never works. For the good reason is that, biologically speaking, that is not the part of the brain you want to talk to. You want to talk to the limbic part of the brain, not the neocortex. Neocortex is just memorization. The second they're out the door, they forget half the stuff. The important part is to go back to, simple, not simplistic. But how those movements start, which Greg Glassman, genius was to explain what fitness is. I want to be able to explain what movement is.
Mm-hmm. Well, Julien, let me ask you this. Within our seminar, we talk about athleticism and skill and ability, and taking the time when you're first introduced to training to develop what we'll call a base level of strength. Mm-hmm. And I can't help but notice that the name of your company includes strong and ours includes power. Why'd you take strong over something else?
Well, you mean like strongman stuff also as well? By the way, speaking of this, let me ask John one thing. Sure. Do you know who Sam Alduenda is?
What's the name?
Sam Alduenda. He was a friend of George Tsengas.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah, dude, I do know Sam very well.
He was my powerlifting coach for 6 years.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
Okay, did you train at George's house?
Yeah, oh yeah, for years. Since I was 14 years old, I trained at his garage.
So you remember that blue power rack?
Yeah, oh yeah.
It's at my gym.
Oh yeah?
No way.
You remember that red safety squat bar?
Yeah.
It's at my gym too.
Oh, you motherfucker. I'm coming.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get him.
When he died, I went to his ex-wife's garage and I bought all his stuff.
You know what? I'm going to throw up right now because I literally hit up Artista and tried to buy all George's stuff after he passed away. And they told me they threw it all away.
Nope, I bought it.
Wow. Well, thank God. Because,
yes.
I mean, literally, I tried to get all that stuff. And
do you want it? It's yours.
Well, the safety squad, I'll trade you one. I have to say, I'll trade you a safety squad. But
do you want the power rack? Get the power rack, man. Come on, that was his. You need to get it.
Yeah,
let's go test drive it first.
Yeah, I'm going to come up and look at it. I'll bring you something and trade, but it's no. I mean, dude. So when George passed away, I mean, so George was a mentor for me. I mean, dude, when I was 14 years old, I trained over there, and like, dude, like, I mean, I've told a million stories on this podcast about that old man. And I remember when he passed away, I saw Sam at his funeral, and I remember talking with him, and like we were rapping a bunch, and I actually asked him because my belts were all there. I mean, all my super suits, wraps. I mean, all the equipment we had, and like George had all those deadlift bars, and he had them preset. So there was like a 540 big bar, and I asked Artista, I was like, Artista, I want George's stuff. Like we got, and she was like, oh, it's all gone. We got rid of it all. And so I don't know why she was like that to blow it
He
off.
was not happy.
No, it was a bad deal.
I went to their house, and she just spent an hour trashing the guy. He was dead 3 days. I was like, okay, sure. You know what I mean? Like Sam was very upset, honestly, because she just she was talking not very nicely about the guy. I was like, the dude has been dead 72 hours. Let it go, lady. Let it go. Just let me. And I was there. I was like, let me buy it. I had no money at the time. I was like, let me buy it because that way it'd be used by lifters. And so I've been squatting in that rack since he died.
Wow. Was this up in the house in PB?
No, there was a house that was her house.
San Pedro?
In San Pedro. Yeah.
So that was George's house. So he, when I trained with him, he lived up in PB, and then when they got a divorce, she got the stores, and then he got the mail order deal. And he was originally he lived up the street from me in Palos Verdes, and then he moved out to San Pedro. And when I saw them at the wedding, or not the wedding, but at the funeral, what was sad was I had a message on my phone from George. So George and I had this epic game of phone tag because George was like a king night owl. Like
I know.
For his phone about like midnight, and dude, when you train at 5 a.m., you got to get up early. So George would call, and he would like call me at like 11:30 midnight, and then I would try to call him back the next day, and he wouldn't call me until midnight. And we had this epic game of phone tag, and I had a message on him from about a week earlier, and I was trying to get a hold of him, and I forgot what we were talking about. And then I get the phone call that he died, and I like see this like the message from him, and I had to listen to it. And like, I'm like, so yeah, we were pretty upset. I mean, my brothers and I all went. I mean, dude, we all trained in George's garage. I mean, George, Steve, like, dude, he raced us from the time we were little kids. I mean, dude, I remember Saturday night, George would come pick me up, and we would go to the taverna. We would, he was as good a friend, and I count much of my influence and everything from him. So one, I'm stoked that you have that stuff.
Yeah.
And two, I'm glad people are using it, and that to me means everything. Because, dude, I legitimately, there were so many things in that gym that I asked.
Sure.
Like he had like the dumbbells. I mean, dude, he had a bunch of different bars. He had one of the very first reverse hypers when Louis developed the reverse hyper. He sent it to George, and I think Sam still has it because when I saw Sam, I think he gave it to him. So Sam might still.
Yeah, it's in his garage. You remember like that harness that he built?
Yes. Yeah.
I have it. It's in my gym.
Dude, there was all of that crazy stuff. I mean,
I know.
That safety squat bar. So we would do the original Hatfield squats with the handle and hold on.
Yeah, I know. I have the handles too.
Yeah, with that blue power rack. That was the first time I ever squatted 300 pounds. First time I ever squatted 400 pounds. First time I ever squatted 500 pounds was in that rack. And
so did I, by the way.
Look at that, dude. The funny part is, so George advertised in all these different magazines, for the supplements for Marathon. Yeah. So he had literally hundreds of stacks of magazines all over. So like when we were kids, like we would show up and we'd rack, and then like we would sit there and we would read the magazines. And so like I asked him, like, where are those magazines? Because there was hundreds of like Powerlifting USA, all this stuff, and like articles George had written in all these different magazines. I mean, dude, all the old lifters we met. I mean, it was. I'm so excited to know that people are using that stuff. Yeah. Like my brothers and I were so distraught that we throw that away, because you can ask these guys. I collect old equipment. Like I joined a gym just because they had the original Hatfield safety squat bar, like George had. And I have it here. And when the gym closed, I told the guy, I'm like, I'll buy whatever you want. The guy in the gym.
I got those leather handles he used to do tricep extension. I have those.
Yeah.
I got a bunch of stuff, man.
Were there a set of hooks that you put on your wrist with hooks?
Yeah, they were there too.
Yeah, we used to use those for these weird sumo deadlift that we would do with dumbbells. And then we would do all the pull-ups and everything. So I'm stoked you bought all that, dude. I will travel up to see it, and thank you for telling me that, dude. That's huge for me. because I was so upset he threw it all away.
Did you ever meet Joe DiMarco as well in Torrance?
Joe DeMarco.
The original West Side.
Yes. Yeah,
he came to my gym 3 times a week.
Yeah,
I have the best stories ever from that guy.
well, that's when I asked you. I was like, dude, are you from Torrance? Because when I saw the deal, I was like, dude, I grew up there.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, that's my old stomping ground. So, but it was always cool at George's because you never knew who was going to show up.
Yeah.
Like we would get there around like 9:30. We had to have like 3 cups of coffee, which is always funny for like, when I joke about these, the Zangus coffee was actually sludge. And then we would finally start rolling at like 10 or 11, and then dudes would start showing up at like 1 o'clock, and you need to hang out and rack weights for these cats. And it was like, oh shit, they got sandwiches? And you're like, I can't believe I just had sandwiches and lifted weights for 5 hours. My dad would show up and he'd be like, you can't leave.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you don't understand who showed up that day, Dad.
Yeah, I mean, he was a legend. So I was, pretty sad when he passed away. I mean, John Papadakis gave up and gave a pretty good eulogy of him. But I mean, super sad.
So we like, for example, me, I wanted to record like all the Joe DiMarco's story because he was original West Side, so in Culver City.
Yeah,
with Bill West. Yeah, with Bill West, all that stuff. Yeah. So he had Pat Casey, 600-pound, 615 bench press, was in his garage.
Yep.
He was there when it happened. Like, I mean, they locked him up with a hooker for 2 hours first, and then he got to bench press 615. He had stories like that where you go, what?
Yeah.
And he keeps on going on and on and on and on like that. Man, that was so cool.
Yeah, George always told us all the good stories. I mean, I remember he was telling us that when he was coaching the Thompson powerlifting team, it was who was the Frank Zane used to come and train with them all the time, and they called him the chemist. Because Frank Zane was the dude that just knew all this stuff. And so he said, it was all over the map. So I remember he's like, as soon as I saw Zane, I knew it was going to be a good day. And but just the stories. I mean, the one good thing about George is he knew it, he saw it, and he had an opinion about it. And I remember it was always cool. One, I've run into people that still have his original marathon gear. I was out at Westside, and one of the girls actually busted a set of his wraps out of the bag. I mean, the double gold medal ones. And I was like, and she looked, she's like, can't get these anymore. I'm like, yeah, the man died. I mean, that was the end of marathon. So, I mean, he invented the super suits and the wraps. And ironically, Guyver's, which was that, the historic gym was just right down here in Costa Mesa. And George ended up giving me the address when I lived down here, and I drove it. It's an apartment complex. But George told us about this gym, Guyver's, where all this homemade equipment, and the door weighed like 10,000 pounds. It had this huge like knocker, and like you had to be a strong fucking dude just to open the door. And so George, and he gave me the address. He like pulled it out of some magazine, and I drove over, and it's literally like if you go down Placentia, you make a right, and it's back in there, before you get to Harbor. And he gave me the address, and I sent him a picture, and he's like, Jesus Christ, that was the greatest fucking gym in the world. People traveled from all over to go to Guyver's. So, I mean, Zangus's garage was another one. So, I mean, that's good. I'm really super. That brings joy to my heart to know that you have that stuff.
Yep, it was really cool. And Sam tried to get me to fit in that suit, and I said no. He brought it. I was like, I'm not going in that thing. That is not happening. I'm not doing this.
I had one of George's suits, and they were so aggressive. Squatted heavy, you would have bruises all over.
Yeah.
They
not
were
doing it.
Yeah, so uncomfortable. But
I said, fuck that.
Yeah, no, I mean I remember when I squatted 650 or 610 in college. I remember he called me the night before, and like super late. I was in college. He called me and he's like, "Oh, you're testing tomorrow." I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "What are you gonna squat?" And I'm like, "I'm squat 600." He's like, "No, you're gonna do 610, and here's all your workups." And so he was like, "I want you to do this set for this many, this. I want you to wrap here," and he like gave me everything. And then for the bench, and this is what I want you to hit. And I went in, and I remember I squatted the 610 when I was 19 for our test, and I called him like as soon as I got home, and he was like, they just hear George like, like just breathing out of his nose, and that was good. He was a good friend of mine, and I was super sad when he passed away. I count him as
me too. I got to meet him like a few months before he died and everything. So we started talking because he wanted to do supplements again because he was broke basically. And I was like, look, I know a lot of people in strongman. I got a lot of people in CrossFit. I can Valerie Vobral, I was training her at the time already and everything. I was like, I would love to get your knowledge should be passed on.
Yeah. No,
unfortunately, yeah.
I was trying to get him on. So Mark Ripto had his deal where he was interviewing different people, and he interviewed me, and he had Kurt Kowalski and different people.
Yep.
And I was trying like a motherfucker to try to get George to go down on his show, but George didn't want to fly to Texas to do it, and fuck this. And he was kind of bitter, and I was like, George, I'm like, dude, the amount of knowledge that I mean, dude, and it's not so much anymore, but probably I get an email at least maybe every 2 months from somebody either about George, looking for George, and how many people have asked me what the programming looked like at George's gym. Like, what did you guys do for programming? What did it deal this? And, and I tell them what I remember, but I was like, honestly, nothing was ever written down. And George told you what you were going to do that day. This is what you're going to do today. And I never asked for anything outside of that day.
Okay. Next time you go to Torrance, when you visit the gym, I need to get you to talk to Joe. And you need to either put it on camera, put it on paper, but get the programming, get the stories, get all this, because those guys will be gone soon. And that's a shame, because he has stories of, it was George, who did that? 600 for 30. He was there when it happened. It's back squat.
Yeah.
He was there when it happened. He got there at 17. He was, George, I forget his last name all the time, but he was there when the guy did 600 for 30. He was there when the guys were doing like dumbbell presses with the 315 homemade dumbbells, holding to a pipe. He has stories like this where you go, what the fuck? What do you mean? That's not possible. He was like, I was there when the guy did it.
Dude, when the guy that trained, or my training partner was a guy named Tasso Papadakis, and he's John Papadakis' son, and Petros, who's Tasso's brother, is on the radio a bunch now. But Tasso's the one that got me into lifting. George was Mitzi, who's Tasso's youngest brother's godfather. And so George was like godfather to all of us. But Tasso got me into lifting weights. And Tasso, I watched him squat 500 for 10 at 16 years old. I'm sorry, no, he was 15. I was 14.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, there was Rob Coulter, who was a running back. I mean, dude, I watched Rob Coulter squat like 405 for a set of 20 as a drop set as like an 18-year-old kid going out to Arizona. I mean, dude, Brandon, right? Yeah. I mean, Brandon Wright was strong. I mean, every kid that trained at George's gym was even I remember watching these guys train, and even what I was able to do, and like some of the things are, like what Zach Evanesh was talking about, like, like old school, like I joke with Zach, he's like, it's gotta be old school. But I was like, dude, when I was in, 1990, 91, 92, like, we had 15, 16, 17-year-old kids that were squatting 400 and 500 pounds for multiple reps. I mean, not 3 and 4. I mean, sets of 5, 10, 15, and 20. And I mean, that was, pulling 500-600 pound deadlifts. And like, that was just the norm. And because there was like, not only was George strong, but everybody was training there, strength is infectious. Like when you see people do shit like that, like it makes you not only, and that's what Louis always talked about, that the reason Westside exists where it does is because you're training at Westside. You can't do Westside unless you're at Westside because of the environment. You watch people do it, and the fucking camaraderie, and the fight and the will. And that's the reason that George trained with a bunch of fucking young kids, because he's like, I don't want to train with a bunch of old fuckers. I want I want a bunch of young go-hards. Yeah, I want a bunch of young go-hards. I mean, part of our deal, even as a young kid, was part of your job when you showed up there was you had to rack his weights, which was a sign of respect. The old man doesn't rack his own weights. You rack his weights. Mm-hmm. And so, there's 5, 10 kids in there, and like, George is calling, hey, I want this. And fucking, go get me a copy, whatever you do. I mean, you are there as that's part of the maturation process, and we run into people all the time that don't understand that shit. I'm like, dude, understand your history.
Well,
understand
you're in
your role.
Orange County. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I mean, that's a good point, though.
It's 2016 in Orange County.
Yeah, no, that upsets me.
I get it, dude.
No, I mean, it's and we had a great text. I'm pretty upset that fucking we weren't able to get that whole podcast on, but we were out in Philadelphia this weekend teaching that seminar. We stopped in, we saw Jim Steele, and Zach came down and hung out, and we jumped on a podcast, and we talked for like 4 or 5 hours? I mean, but like Jim Steele is a fucking amazing human being in terms of like what he done, what he done. It all came back to this thing like, the thing that he's noticed over the years, and we've noticed it too, is people just don't want it the same way. Like, what do you mean? Like, yeah, I mean, fuck, when I was 14 years old, I was so excited that George invited me over, because he didn't invite everybody. You had to be like invited. And I remember before I went, the night before I got to go the first time, there was a mirror. We had a full length mirror by our front door, and I remember squatting and doing my movements in the mirror.
Yeah.
I tell you this, so that I wouldn't look bad.
I get it. Yeah.
Right? Like I was like, oh, I want to squat deep. I want to squat this and all these things. And then all of a sudden, you figure like, here, you get over there under load, and it looks like dog shit.
Yeah. I mean, it's the shit that
that
kids should be doing instead of flicking. I don't know. Fuck it. What we,
But dude, and then I also told him the funny story about George called me. We went up to Marathon, and he up in the Peninsula Center, and he hands me this box, and I'm like, he like hands it over. He's like, here, what is it? He's like, don't ask. But what I want you to do is I want you to take 5 teaspoons 5 times a day of this stuff, and let me know how you do. And I was like, all right. So I leave there, and my brother like drove me up there, and he's like, George says we have to take 5 teaspoons of this 5 times a day, and he's like, that's what he said. I'm like, yeah. He's like, all right. So it's creatine, right? So this is brand new supplement. Nobody's ever heard of creatine. I'm like 15 years old. My brother Eddie's like, no, I was 14. My brother Eddie was like 17, so he was driving. And so we get it, and we go home, and we're like, he's like, mix it with grape juice. So we go buy grape juice. We put it in 5. You're only we took 25 grams of creatine 5 times a day. So it was 125 grams. We're only supposed to take 5 grams over a course of a day.
So Dr. Tom did. Huh?
So, totally. So I don't know if anybody's ever taken too much creatine, but it causes terrible fucking stomach problems.
Yeah.
So then my brother and I are taking it, and he's like he goes to work, comes back, we're going to go train, and we're at the track. And as we're running, like shooting pains, I'm laying on the ground, and my brother Eddie's screaming at me.
I think it's working.
It's fucking, dude, this is what we have to fucking go through. And I'm like, I can't fucking do it. Somehow we finish this run, get home, and I call George. I'm like, George, I can't take this stuff. I'm fucking, it's like somebody's knifing me in the stomach. And he's like, whoa, how much did you take? I told him, I'm like, you told me to take 5 teaspoons 5 times a day. And he's like, no, 1 teaspoon 5 times a day. And he's like, Jesus Christ. And so it's pretty funny. We pushed the ethical out there. And that was a funny George comment. And then, of course, it's like, what do you think? He just kind of was like, hung up on me.
Yeah.
That's just fucking gruff. I mean, dude, I remember George stopped by the high school and saw me. I'm like, what happened? He's like, I was just up in the Peninsula Center, and some dude got into it with the cop, and the cop was wrestling him, and I went over there and put my 45 in his fucking head.
Oh yeah, there you go. That's one way to
like that was like a classic, military. I mean, dude, yeah, I love that crazy old man. So, dude, thank you very much for saving that equipment. I will come up and check it out. And we should get those guys on podcast, because Sam, Sam's great. I mean, he was always such a very nice, well-spoken dude. Like, just whenever I see him. So, yeah, thank you. Take me down memory lane.
And by the way, I saw him pull 440 for either 3 or 5 reps. He was 69 at the time.
Wow.
That's right.
Hey, by the way, the guy weighs 160 pounds.
Yeah, Sam was always really strong and in really good shape. Yeah, he's right. He's got to be in his 70s. Yeah,
he's 73 now, 74.
Well, let's fucking Julien. I'll connect with you offline, and we'll make something happen. We'll get something scheduled.
Yeah, we'd love.
You need Joe's stories, and he wants to talk about it. There's just nobody is left. Nobody even knows the guy he's talking about. That's why he was talking to me so much, because I knew who he was talking about. Because that's the history of the game. You have to know those. Nobody knows who Pat Casey is anymore.
Well, George would always talk about these guys, but it would be about 6-7 years ago. I get a gift in the mail, and it's from Zach Evanesh, and it was Dr. Ken Lassinger, or Dr. Ken, I forget it's Lassinger or Lassinger, but Dr. Ken basically went back and had copies of all the old powerlifting USA articles.
Yeah, it's Lassinger. I have the books.
Oh, yeah, so he basically printed them out, and he sent it to like Zach Windler and a couple people. Well, Zach ended up making me a copy and sending it, and then we ended up scanning it, and it's part of our coach's curriculum. But it's all of like the stories about box squatting and peanuts and all the guys on the side. And then I remember I called George, and I remember he was still fucking salty at Louis for calling his gym Westside. And like these.
But you know what? Joe is not even upset at it anymore. Like, even Joe was like, "Yeah, that's okay." But the one thing Joe said was he never met Louis. Yeah. Louis said he trained there. Joe doesn't remember him.
Yeah, I mean, it's it was cool. Like I remember like Odie Wilson, stories about Kazmaier. I mean, dude, the fact that like George always told us that Kaz had his truck rigged up or his Cadillac. He drove around a big Cadillac all day. Had his trunk turned into a refrigerator, and he had like this refrigeration deal, like AC hooked up, and he had a blender wired in. And every time he went on a call or whatever he was doing working, he would stop and he would have like protein powder and all this shit. He would make it in his trunk and he would slam a drink. And pretty funny story, but he goes, he just basically, anytime he stopped his car, he got a protein shake. And anytime he got back in the car, he got a protein shake. And I was like, how many protein shakes do you have? He's like, he'd have like, 15 or 20 a day on top of his other meals. And he's like, he was eating probably like 20,000 calories a day. I mean, it's like, no fucking way,
Yeah.
And he's like, but then you look at those pictures of Kaz, where his crafts are through his ears. I mean, he did take more drugs than any human being on the planet, but so did everybody. So, I mean, it's like, I don't really.
He was still bigger than every other guy, by a mile.
Well, I remember when I met Kaz, the one thing that tripped me out, I've only seen this on a couple people. So, like on the wrist this way, Kaz's wrist goes from his thumb here. Like it doesn't go this way. It just is like a full block into his hand. Mm-hmm. And I've only seen that on like 2 or 3 football players.
But do you remember like the picture for the World's Strongest Man? When Bill Kazmaier was lifting stuff, his back was full from the shoulder all the way to the insertion.
Yeah.
It was just one block all the way down. The obliques would merge into the insertion all the way to the shoulder. Bodybuilders don't have that.
Yeah,
all bodybuilders are not like that.
Yeah, his insertion was so low that it was like the lat insertion was connecting to like the erectors almost. But I remember the best compliment that George ever paid anybody, and we've talked about this, was that the goal was to have erectors and hamstrings that looked, or to have hamstrings that looked like steel cables, and then to have erectors that looked like 2 loaves of French bread on the back. George used to always talk about that. He'd always come up behind you and grab right there and be like, they gotta look like loaves of French bread. And so whenever people always ask, they're like, what should I develop? And I'm like, that's good. I mean, if you look like you got 2 loaves of French bread, I mean, that was like the huge compliment for Zangus. So he was a good dude. I'm sad. I'm sad that I don't get to meet him and or talk to him as I used to. And I'm sad we didn't get him on film. I'm sad that we didn't record something like this and really get like a historical reference, because like you said, man, guys are passing away and their knowledge and the stories are unfucking believable.
And what I want people to see also is the way they train, because you realize that periodization doesn't seem to matter nearly as much as the atmosphere of your gym. Yeah. Because the original West Side was a bunch of really strong guys that did their own thing, but in one place, and they all push each other like crazy. Mm-hmm. They trained 2 days a week. At the original West Side, they were training 2 days a week. That's it. That's crazy. Like you hear the stuff and you go, but how? And those are the guys who squatted 600 for 30. So it's always interesting to me because it reminds me not to get stuck too much into the X and O's.
Yeah. No, I mean, well, George always talked about that inherent periodization. And something we really adopted in our training. I mean, when George originally, I remember the first training program he ever handed me, instead of telling me, because I asked him like, well, hey, what should I do in this? And he wrote down, it was the Russian squat routine, 6x2 up to 6x6. And I remember being like, well, what if I can't squat the 6x6? And he was like, well, you obviously started too heavy, and we went through all the discussion. But then I was like, well, how come when we go over to your house, we don't do this? And he's like, well, he goes, I usually watch people warm up, and then I start calling out the reps based on what I want you to do that day. Yep. And, and like the ultimate insult at George's place, and then I've told this guys too, was as you were warming up or hitting some weights, he's like, why don't you take the weight off and just go light and have a form day? And like that was like the ultimate.
I've been there with Sam. Yeah. By the way, he was right every time. I was like, no, I feel great. And then, no, I didn't.
Well, the ultimate kick in the nuts when I asked George once about it, and he's like, you know how you get good at lifting heavy weights? And I was like, I don't know. He's like, you lift heavy weights. And I'm like, then why do you tell us to lighten the weight and have a form day? And he kind of just smiled, and I was like, oh, I get it. That was the ultimate fucking kick in the balls. And literally, he would, there was a lot of life lessons and a lot of good information. And I'm sad that he passed away, and I'm sad we didn't get more information on him. But yeah, my brothers and I all went, and they were sad to see him go. So he was a big influence on me. So thank you. I'm glad to know you're using this equipment, and that because dude, they told me it was all gone. So
No. I'm honestly, I had to fight for it. It wasn't, but she needed money. I was like, I'll come with cash right now.
wow, damn.
So, but that was Sam. Honestly, Sam made it happen because I told Sam, it's like, look, there is no way this is being. I needed it at the gym. He was like, let me talk to her. So he, you know what I mean? Like he worked at it until, and I was like, I'll bring cash right away. And then we're like, okay, it has to be today. I was like, well, let's take the car. Let's go. I have a truck. Let's go.
Yeah, no, they because his daughter, when I hit up her daughter, there was a bunch of like I had given George like the different awards that I got in like high school lineman of the year and a bunch of things, and there was a picture of us, and I'd given him things for the gym, and I remember like getting one thing, and I was like, my belt is still in there with my name on it that he got me, and like there was a bunch of things, and she's like, no, it's all gone. And I was like, shit. So I just figured they were bitter and just called somebody just to haul it all away. So I'm glad to know that red safety squat is still there. That thing was nasty, but yeah, I mean those and then
nasty. I've been using it. This was the first safety squat bar I ever had in my life. I used it for how long has it been dead? 4 years.
My daughters were 3 weeks old when he passed away. So he literally probably died almost exactly 5 years ago. It would probably be here in October.
Okay, so I've been using that safety squat bar for 5 years. That's the only safety squat bar I ever used in my life, is that one. So it still works, trust me.
Oh, yeah, no. Well, I found that the original safety squat bar, the one that we have, like the original Hatfield bar, is so much better because I bought and used a bunch of different ones, and the one that I bought we don't even use anymore because the original one is so much. It's just terrible. It's just so much harder. And like for some reason, I don't know what it is about it, but it's the same one that Louis has at Westside that all the guys use. I mean, Louis has 6 or 7 or 8, 10 different safety squat bars and all these different ones, and they all use the exact same one, which is the original one that they've all had, which is the same.
Yeah, it's the way. By the way, it's heavy as shit too.
Yeah, it weighs exactly like 66 pounds, and it's the padding's all fucked up, and the collar.
Totally.
But
that didn't get any better.
No, it's fucked up. I mean, it literally like people put it on because it's here. No, that thing bruised you because for some reason it was like extra hard on your clavicle. But yeah,
there's duct tape on it anyway. Still, it's the same duct tape. You had it anyway. That gray duct tape. Remember that gray duct tape is still on it.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I mean there was a lot of weird. He had a lot of one-off weird shit that he had made or people had given him or whatnot. Like I remember he had a we have one. We have a top squat. Which is the Dave Draper deal. But he had the very first or one of the first Stingrays, which was that god awful thing that that blue thing that snapped on. Did you ever see that?
Yeah. I didn't buy that. Yeah, I saw it. I saw all that stuff. That's why I bought the harness. I can't use it. It's horribly made. It touches my legs, but I have it. I squatted with it because I was like, fuck it, I'll try.
Yeah, no, dude. He used to have us do weighted carries with that. So they would put weight, and you had to walk around, and we had these dumbbells that were fat grip, like big thick dumbbells, and we had to do like walking up and down the driveway and metabolic condition. So I mean,
was that what it was for? I couldn't figure out what that thing was for because I was like, you can't squat with it. It was heavy carries. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, it was. But I always thought that it was weird because the load was at a funky place.
Yes, very.
Yeah, like I always like the one like the Chuck Vogel.
Yeah, it takes you back completely. Yeah,
this pulls you forward. And,
I put it the other way. I turned it around because I couldn't. I hated going forward, so I put it the other way.
Well, I always thought that George had a bunch of things like he hated the deadlift. Like that was a big thing for him. He said you treat the deadlift like a pretty girl, you ignore it, and you build the deadlift through the squat. I mean, you build the deadlift through every motion other than the deadlift, and then I was thinking about all the stupid shit we had was all designed to not deadlift or to train the deadlift. You would love it.
It sounds great.
You're like, fuck this deadlifting thing, but it was a weird deal. Like we would have these 3-hour squat workouts, and then we would pull 3 reps on the deadlift. It was fucking weird. He'd be like, "Go pull that deadlift just once." I'd be like, "Go and warm up." He's like, "No, we just squatted. You're fine. Go fucking pull it." And we pull 1, 2, 3. You'd be like, "You're done. Too much deadlifting."
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it was great. Oh shit, man! I didn't even know we were going down memory lane. So I'm sure I bored all these people.
There you go,
old man. Dude, but Julien.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah,
another small world, right?
Yeah, thank you for connecting. Dude, I'm really stoked that we got to add you to our little sphere of influence. And dude, I will definitely come up to the gym and we can bullshit a little bit. We'll go to lunch and yeah, man, I'd love to try to get some of these guys on and we could rap with them or come up and record.
For sure.
Do some things.
You have to tell me when because I'm traveling the world. So I'll be in the States like 4 weeks out of the year, maybe.
Oh, really? Okay. Well,
right now, yeah. I'm booked till July. So.
Oh, 2017?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. Well, we'll try to make it happen then. We'll when you're in town. So we'll shoot an email and let me know what your schedule looks like and we'll make it work.
Yep.
Julien, if people want to get more of you, where do they go? What site, what Facebook, what Instagram, where do you want people?
Instagram, StrongFit1.
Yeah.
Go on strongfit.com.
And then go down
I'm out there.
Okay,
yeah,
so
I'm out there, man.
Awesome. Again, just echoing John, appreciate the time. You are a busy man, much like a lot of our guests, and it's awesome to sit and chat, man.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
All right, see you later, Julien. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Now it's time for you to empower your performance. Find Julien Pineau on Instagram under the name @StrongFit1. That's the number 1. Or visit his website for seminar info, www.strongfit.com. This year's Power Athlete Symposium is now open to the public for the first time. If you haven't heard of this annual Knowledge Fest, it's basically the most badass 3 days spent in SoCal. Rub elbows with fellow power athletes and soak up the wisdom from guest speakers like Rob Wolf, Andy Stumpf, Aaron Ausmus, and Brad Snyder. Of course, you can expect that the Power Athlete crew will also be leading the weekend with the latest and greatest out of HQ. Registration can be found at powerathletehq.com/symposium, and it closes on November 23rd. Hope to see everyone there. Until next time, bye!